John, how come we didn't have a huge bout of either deflation or inflation?
Well, this was the arguments that we saw two sides take on the economy after the financial crisis. We had some people say all the money printing that the Fed was doing was going to cause a bout of inflation. Other people say all the slack in the economy was going to cause deflation, or at least falling inflation. Neither one came out. It turns out there's a third factor that matters more than those two issues, and that's a very ethereal factor, which is people's expectations. It turns out what we've learned in the last couple of years is that when people don't expect either one, we don't get it. People behave based on their expectations for the future. Their expectations are stable inflation, and that's kept inflation anchored. And this sounds like a very academic issue that we're talking about right now, but it's an issue that really matters for the Fed, which is going to play a big role in how they make their next set of decisions about interest rates.
John, I have to think the Fed, we all know what the Fed did over the past 3 or 4 years. Massive monetary, aggressive stimulus measures.
Right.
Didn't those sort of provide a counterweight to the deflation that was kind of floating around? I mean, I have to think that if the Fed didn't do those things, we would have seen more deflation in 2008, 2009, maybe even 2010.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the arguments, and it's one of the arguments that the most senior people at the Fed make themselves. Ben Bernanke, Janet Yellen, they think that everything that they did prevented a deflationary spiral. But if you push these people, you find out that even they are having some second thoughts about just how important slack is in the economy. High unemployment, unused factories, things like that. The fact of the matter is the Fed, because there was so much slack in the economy, the Fed had expecting less inflation than it turns out that we've gotten. So this slack argument, the deflation argument that even senior people at the Fed have made, it turns out isn't as powerful as reality has borne out to be the case. And they're debating this now as they decide what to do less. Well, if slack isn't so important, then what is driving an inflation, and how much leeway does that leave us to do more, to do another round of QE?
Yeah, and I guess that's the real question, right? What does the Fed do next? People in the markets are still talking QE, QE3,
right, even
though I'm not so sure we're going to get it.
Well, so there's two battlegrounds that are shaping up in the Fed right now. So one battleground, you have. I think everyone at the Fed is come to the conclusion that this inflation expectations part really matters a lot. So there's one group of people who says, well, you know what? We were never going to get as much deflation as we were afraid we were going to get, that we don't have to be fighting deflation anymore, and therefore we shouldn't do anything else. Right? That's what the inflation hawks say. We don't need to do anything else because deflation was never as big a risk as we said. The other camp says that, well, wait a second. Inflation expectations are so stable that we were never at risk of getting all the inflation that you guys said we were going to get. Because inflation is so stable, we actually have plenty of room to do more if we want to do more. And we can work on the unemployment problem by putting more stimulus into the economy because inflation isn't a risk.
All right, Jon
and these are
Hilsenrath,
the two battlegrounds right now.